These were Humberto Leal's last words.
He said, "I am sorry for everything that I have done. I've hurt a lot of people. For years, I have never thought that I deserved any type of forgiveness."
On a scorching July evening in Texas, a man lay strapped to a gurney, his voice shaking as he whispered a final apology, and then in his very last breath, he erupted with a cry that echoed far beyond the prison walls. "Viva Mexico!" Moments later, the lethal injection began to flow, and with it, a storm erupted that the world had not seen coming. Because this execution didn't just end a life. It ignited a diplomatic wildfire. It challenged the power of governments. It shook the very foundation of international law itself. Because the man on that gurney wasn't just another inmate. He was Humberto Leal García, a Mexican national whose case dragged the United States into a global courtroom, forced presidents to intervene, and sparked a battle between justice and international responsibility. A battle that revealed secrets, exposed errors, and raised one huge, haunting question. What happens when a brutal crime, a broken treaty, and the world's most powerful nation collide? Tonight, we dive deep into the crime, the controversy, the political chaos, and the truth most people have never heard. Before we begin, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any more jaw-dropping true crime stories like this one. Humberto Leal García was born on January 16, 1973, in Monterrey, Nuevo León, Mexico, into a life that took a dramatic turn at just 2 years old, when his family brought him to the United States. Leaving behind the streets, culture, and early memories of his birthplace, he grew up in San Antonio, Texas, a city full of energy but also marked by poverty, struggle, and social challenges. His upbringing was complicated. As a child, he reportedly suffered brain damage and endured sexual abuse by a priest, experiences that would leave lasting scars and influence the trajectory of his life. Neighbors and acquaintances described Leal as a friendly and approachable boy, someone who could make people laugh and fit in easily, masking the turbulence beneath the surface. Yet the environment around him, exposure to alcohol, minor delinquency, and the presence of gangs, shaped his adolescence, leaving a trail of difficulties and risky choices. He was also living in the United States as an illegal immigrant, navigating the pressures of identity, survival, and legality in a country that was not fully his own. By his teenage years, Leal had dropped out of school and began working as a mechanic, earning a living through labor while learning to navigate the harsh realities of life on his own. This dual existence, a Mexican-born boy growing up in America, caught between two cultures, two worlds, and two identities, defined him. It created a man who never fully belonged to either society, constantly negotiating who he was and where he fit in, a struggle that would foreshadow the turbulent and tragic path his life would take. On the night of May 21, 1994, 16-year-old Adria Sauceda attended a birthday party on the south side of San Antonio, Texas. What was meant to be a joyful celebration quickly turned tragic. The house was crowded with teenagers, alcohol was freely consumed, and some guests had used drugs, creating a chaotic environment with minimal supervision. Adria, separated from her friends and weakened by intoxication, became vulnerable to a group of older men who forcibly took advantage of her. Witnesses later reported seeing her struggle to leave, but she was overpowered and removed from the party. During this time, Humberto Leal García approached under the pretense of helping her and offered to drive her home. Instead, he led her away from the party. Court records and official documents later revealed the extreme severity of the assault. There was a 30 to 40-pound asphalt rock roughly twice the size of the victim's skull lying partially on the victim's left arm. Blood was underneath this rock. A smaller rock with blood on it was located near the victim's right thigh. There was also a stick 15 inches in length extending out of her private part, with a screw at the end. Leal claimed that she fell and hit her head. No one was charged in the gang rape. Earlier that month, Leal had also assaulted another teenage girl, demonstrating a disturbing pattern of behavior. By the early hours of May 22, 1994, law enforcement located Adria's body and began a careful collection of evidence. Blood found in Leal's car, her personal items in his possession, and multiple eyewitness accounts placed him with her during the critical moments leading to her death. Authorities documented the events thoroughly, ensuring the crime was described factually and without unnecessary sensationalism. Confronted with the evidence, Humberto Leal García was arrested swiftly on May 22, 1994, as investigators compiled witness testimony and forensic evidence that clearly established his responsibility for this tragic and violent crime. Once the police had identified Humberto Leal García as the chief suspect, law enforcement in San Antonio launched a full-scale investigation on May 22, 1994. Officers began interrogating him repeatedly, pressing him for details about his whereabouts the night before, his connection to the victim, and what had occurred at the party. Leal appeared nervous and uneasy under the bright lights of the interview room. His statements were fragmented at times, shuffling between denial, evasive comments, and incomplete memories. The interrogators pressed harder, pointing out witness testimonies placing him with the victim. Over hours, the pressure built. The walls closed in, the questions repeated, the silence heavy. Yet amid this critical betrayal of trust, a man detained by U.S. law enforcement, the police failed to inform Leal of a fundamental right. Though he was a foreign national, they never advised him that he had the right to contact his country's consulate for legal assistance, translation help, or diplomatic support. That failure violated the obligations under Vienna Convention on Consular Relations (VCCR), an international treaty ratified by the United States. Under Article 36 of the VCCR, any foreign national arrested or detained must be told without delay of their right to have their consulate notified, a safeguard designed to help ensure fair treatment, legal representation, and proper defense. Because the authorities skipped that step, Leal never had the chance to secure consular support before his trial. No access to the Mexican consulate, no chance to bring an experienced defense counsel familiar with cross-border complications, no translation or diplomatic assistance. Instead, the statements he gave, under pressure, vulnerable, without full understanding, formed a core of the prosecution's case. This procedural breach turned the case from a local murder investigation into a matter of international law, a moment when a routine interrogation and arrest wore the cloak of diplomatic scandal. That single mistake, failing to advise him of his consular rights, eventually sparked global outcry, legal challenges, and diplomatic tension. It became bigger than anyone imagined, setting the stage for years of appeals, scrutiny, and a fight not just over guilt but over justice itself. The trial of Humberto Leal García began in the summer of 1995, drawing intense attention in San Antonio and across Texas as the courtroom filled with tense anticipation. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously reconstructed from the crime scene. Witness testimony that placed Leal with 16-year-old Adria Sauceda on the night of the attack, forensic traces linking him to her body, and physical evidence collected from his car and home. Every detail, from the timeline of the party to the injuries sustained by the victim, was laid out with precision, painting a picture of calculated brutality that left jurors visibly shaken. The defense fought vigorously, arguing that the process had been fundamentally unfair. They highlighted that crucial forensic testing had not been performed, that Leal had not been informed of his consular rights under the Vienna Convention, and that key witnesses had not been fully examined. They painted a portrait of a man caught in a system that had failed to protect him, emphasizing inconsistencies and gaps in the evidence, and pleading for careful consideration of these oversights. Yet even as they spoke, the weight of the prosecution's case loomed large, and the tension in the courtroom became palpable. Jurors reacted to the graphic details with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Some whispered among themselves, others leaned forward, eyes fixed on the testimony and exhibits that recounted the brutality of the assault. The gravity of the crime, the assault, the injuries, the violence, struck the courtroom like a physical force. After days of testimony, the deliberations were brief. The jury returned with a quick verdict. Humberto Leal García was found guilty on all counts. The judge then handed down the sentence: death by lethal injection, a punishment that underscored both the severity of the crime and the contentious nature of the case. The courtroom erupted in a mix of gasps, cries, and stunned silence, as everyone present felt the weight of the law, the evidence, and the beginning of a legal and international battle that had only just begun. As soon as Humberto Leal García's death sentence was handed down, the fight over his fate escalated far beyond the walls of a Texas courtroom. The Mexican government immediately stepped in, arguing that his rights under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations had been violated, emphasizing that Leal had never been informed of his right to contact the Mexican consulate after his arrest. This diplomatic intervention transformed the case into an international flashpoint, and in 2004 the International Court of Justice (ICJ) issued a historic ruling declaring that the United States had failed to uphold its treaty obligations, ordering a review of Leal's conviction and sentence. The ruling sent shockwaves through the U.S. legal system, signaling that a state-level death penalty case could now carry international consequences. The situation escalated further as the United Nations became involved, condemning the procedural errors and urging that Leal's rights be fully respected. Human rights organizations, most prominently Amnesty International, mobilized in protest, calling attention to the potential injustice and the broader implications for foreign nationals facing the U.S. legal system. The U.S. State Department, recognizing the high stakes, warned Texas officials repeatedly, executing Leal without resolving the treaty violations could endanger Americans abroad by setting a precedent that other countries might retaliate against U.S. citizens. Yet, despite mounting pressure from governments, courts, and international organizations, Texas remained resolute, refusing to halt the execution or fully comply with the ICJ's directive, framing the conflict as a matter of state sovereignty and the finality of its criminal justice process. At this point, the case had transformed from a local murder trial into a battle between national law and international law, state authority and global diplomacy. It was no longer only about Humberto Leal García. It had become a high-stakes confrontation testing the boundaries of American justice against the expectations and obligations of the international community, a legal and moral struggle that captured headlines worldwide and left observers questioning how far a state could go before the world intervened. As the years passed, Humberto Leal García's case became a relentless diplomatic battleground, drawing the attention of the highest offices in the United States. Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, during their respective terms, personally pressured Texas to reconsider the execution, highlighting the extraordinary international implications and the potential dangers for American citizens abroad. In response, the Mexican government escalated its efforts, petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court to intervene, arguing that the state had violated Leal's rights under international law and urging a stay of execution. Foreign relations experts warned repeatedly that proceeding without addressing the consular rights violation could trigger retaliation against Americans in other countries, framing the case as a test of U.S. credibility and adherence to treaty obligations. Texas officials, led by the Attorney General, stood firm, asserting that Texas is not bound by foreign courts, emphasizing state sovereignty and the finality of their criminal justice process. Amid this high-stakes standoff, the emotional weight of the case became impossible to ignore. Families of both the victim, Adria Sauceda, and Humberto Leal appeared in media interviews, sharing grief, outrage, and heartbreak, humanizing the complex web of crime, justice, and diplomacy. Public opinion fractured. Half the world viewed Leal as a man who had committed a monstrous, unforgivable crime deserving the harshest punishment. The other half focused on the international legal principle, seeing a man denied basic consular rights, caught in a system unprepared to respect treaty obligations. The stage was set for a confrontation that transcended law, emotion, and politics. As execution day approached, every legal avenue was exhausted in a frantic effort to delay the lethal injection. The U.S. government formally requested a stay, citing the Vienna Convention violation and the extraordinary diplomatic pressure mounting from Mexico and the international community. Meanwhile, Congress debated last-minute legislative interventions, contemplating extraordinary measures to intervene in a state-level death penalty case, a dramatic reflection of how deeply the case had shaken national politics. The Supreme Court convened and, after tense deliberations, issued a narrow 5-4 decision against the delay, leaving Leal's fate in the hands of Texas officials. Justice Antonin Scalia delivered particularly strong comments, underscoring the court's unwillingness to interfere with state authority and framing the decision as a strict interpretation of federalism and judicial limits. In that moment, it became chillingly clear that the law had run out and time had run out. All appeals denied, all interventions exhausted, and all diplomatic pressure unable to sway the state, the path led inexorably to the execution chamber. The courtroom, the streets, and the world watched as one man's life teetered on the finality of the law, while debates over justice, rights, and international obligation raged on in the hearts and minds of millions. The execution was no longer merely about Humberto Leal García. It had become a defining, haunting symbol of the collision between state authority, human rights, and international law. On July 7, 2011, Humberto Leal García was executed by lethal injection at 6:21 p.m. Central Standard Time at the Huntsville unit in Texas, the state's primary execution chamber, where decades of death sentences had been carried out under strict protocol. The atmosphere inside the prison that evening was heavy with tension, silence, and the precise, methodical movements of guards preparing the chamber. Leal, calm but resolute, was escorted along the sterile corridors, each step echoing through the facility as he approached the gurney that marked the final stage of his life. Witnesses, including prison officials, media representatives, and a few family members, watched in hushed anticipation, fully aware of the historic and controversial significance of the moment. Before the procedure began, Leal spoke his final words, taking responsibility for his crime and expressing remorse to the family of 16-year-old Adria Sauceda. Then, in a moment that resonated far beyond the chamber walls, he shouted, "Viva Mexico!" A proud affirmation of his heritage that left a lasting impression on all present and was widely reported around the world. Earlier that day he had consumed his last meal, which consisted of fried chicken, pico de gallo, and tacos guisados, a simple yet poignant ritual marking the human side of his final hours. As the lethal injection began, the room was filled with a tense, almost suffocating quiet, punctuated only by the procedural movements of the prison staff. Outside the prison, emotions surged in stark contrast. Supporters of Leal waved Mexican flags and voiced solidarity, while the family of the victim and advocates expressed grief and outrage. Every second in the chamber felt stretched under the weight of justice, morality, and decades of legal battles. That evening, the execution did not merely end a life. It concluded a story that had spanned continents, challenged governments, and ignited global debate over the intersections of crime, punishment, and international law. As we close the story of Humberto Leal García, we are left with questions that go far beyond the facts of the case. Questions about justice, morality, and the weight of human choices. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Share your city, your country, and join this global conversation. And more importantly, imagine yourself in the judge's seat. Knowing everything that happened, the crime, the investigation, the appeals, and the international controversy, how would you have judged this matter? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. There's no right or wrong answer. We want to hear your perspective, your reasoning, and how you weigh justice, law, and humanity. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next jaw-dropping true crime story.